love the Ravens as much as we do, then smash that subscribe button and stay locked in with Flock News for all the drama updates and excitement all season long. So the NFL world is buzzing right now with this whole Terry McLaurin situation. And honestly, it's not hard to see why. The guy's one of the most consistent wide receivers in the league, a legitimate weapon on any offense, and now he wants out of Washington. Talks for a contract extension have reportedly stalled, and McLaurin has made it clear he wants a fresh start elsewhere. Of course, that kind of news sets the league on fire. And it doesn't take long before fans, especially Ravens fans, start asking the big question, should Baltimore make a move? Now on the surface, it sounds like a dream. You got Lamar Jackson, an MVP quarterback, and a chance to pair him up with a veteran like McLaurin who runs crisp routes, makes tough catches in traffic, and has proven he can produce even with inconsistent quarterback play in Washington. Plus, McLaurin wouldn't even need to move far. The DMV connection is already there. Seems like the stars are aligning right, but let's slow down a second. Because as tempting as it may seem, the Baltimore Ravens should absolutely stay out of the Terry McLaurin sweepstakes. This isn't the same Ravens front office that once looked to jump on every big-name wide receiver who hit the market. Things have changed. The priorities are different now. The cap situation is tighter, the roster's deeper, and most importantly, the strategy is way more focused on sustainability than flash. That might not be the most exciting path, but it's the smart one. And it's the one that should keep Baltimore far away from a McLaurin trade. Let's talk about the biggest issue first, the money. Terry McLaurin is not just looking for a new team. He's looking for a massive payday. We're talking about over $30 million per season, a number that would put him among the highest paid receivers in the league. And look, he's earned respect. Nobody's denying that. He's tough, he's reliable, and he's put up strong numbers in a system that hasn't exactly done him any favors. But he's also turning 30 years old next month. That matters, especially when you're talking about long-term cap planning in a league where youth speed and future potential often trump past production. Now contrast that with what the Ravens already have. They've just given Rashad Bateman a contract extension. That's money already committed. And behind him, they've got Zay Flowers, a guy who's on the verge of breaking out in a big way. Flowers is younger, faster, more dynamic in space, and he's only just beginning to scratch the surface of what he can do in the league. He's also going to need an extension sooner rather than later. And if you drop McLaurin's contract into that mix, suddenly you've got financial chaos. Let's be honest. The only real way the Ravens could afford to bring in Terry McLaurin on the kind of deal he's asking for would be to trade Zay Flowers. And that flat out would be a mistake. A colossal mistake. You don't give up a third-year receiver with superstar potential who's 5 years younger and still has 3 or 4 more years of team control just to chase short-term production. That's not how winning organizations are built. That's how desperate teams operate. Baltimore is not that team. Now, some people are saying maybe McLaurin's just using the trade request as leverage, trying to pressure Washington's front office into upping their offer. That's possible. Wouldn't be the first time a star player used that kind of tactic to move the needle. And if that's the case, then fine, let the Commanders figure it out. It's their situation to manage, but Baltimore shouldn't be their team to step in and clean up that mess, especially not when the front office has worked so hard to build a solid young receiving core from the ground up. And if the Commanders were really serious about moving him, you'd think they would have done it by now. They would have addressed the position more aggressively in the draft. They would have made moves to fill the void before it became a problem. But they didn't. Which tells you one of two things. Either they don't believe the trade request is real, or they still think there's a chance to get something done. Either way, Baltimore doesn't need to get caught in the middle of it. Let's not forget what kind of offense the Ravens are building either. This isn't the old ground and pound system that leaned heavily on tight ends and asked receivers to block more than catch. Under Todd Monken, the passing game is more creative, more vertical, and more balanced. There's actual structure to the route concepts now, real spacing and timing between the quarterback and the receivers. Zay Flowers thrived in that setup last year. He was electric after the catch ran precise routes and became Lamar's go-to target in crunch time. Why mess with that chemistry just to add another veteran who would demand touches, demand targets, and demand a salary that reshapes your entire roster planning? If anything, the Ravens are finally in a position where they don't need to chase stars. They've built something that's working. They've got a clear identity on both sides of the ball, a quarterback locked in for the long haul, and a coaching staff that understands how to maximize young talent. Bringing in McLaurin would be like throwing a wrench into a well-oiled machine. Not because he isn't talented, he absolutely is, but because the fit just doesn't make sense at this stage of Baltimore's evolution. And let's flip it for a second. Even if the Ravens did somehow pull off a trade, how much better would that make them? Would McLaurin really push them over the top in a loaded AFC where the Chiefs, Bengals, Bills, and now even teams like the Texans and Jets are loading up, maybe marginally? But is that marginal upgrade worth sacrificing flexibility, cap space, and a young star in the making? Probably not. Now, on the defensive side of things, there's actually a more interesting storyline brewing. It doesn't have the same headline appeal as a McLaurin trade, but it says a lot about where this team's mindset is at. Development depth and internal growth. We're talking about Jalen Armour-Davis, fourth-year cornerback, former fourth-round pick, and someone who's been flying way under the radar until recently. But now, out of nowhere, the coaching staff, especially defensive coordinator Zach Orr, is giving him some serious praise. And not just the usual training camp fluff. Orr actually said Armour-Davis might be the smartest defensive back in the room. That's a bold statement, especially on a team that has guys like Marlon Humphrey and Kyle Hamilton patrolling the secondary. But Orr explained that Armour-Davis knows all the positions. He can play outside in the slot and even took some reps at safety during OTAs. That kind of versatility is gold in a defense that thrives on disguise and flexibility. And considering the injuries the Ravens have had at safety, including Darius Washington tearing his Achilles and missing most of the upcoming season, it makes total sense that they're looking for contingency options from within. Armour-Davis hasn't had an easy road though. He's struggled with injuries basically every year since he entered the league. Hip issues, hamstring problems, you name it. He's never played more than 8 games in a season, but now heading into a contract year, there's a sense of urgency. And according to the coaching staff, he's attacking the opportunity head on. He's working hard, soaking up every rep, and starting to put together the kind of tape that gets you noticed in meetings. That's what this Ravens team is really about right now. Not just big-name acquisitions or splashy moves, but guys earning their roles, building chemistry, and stepping up when their numbers call. Whether it's Jalen Armour-Davis carving out a spot as a hybrid defensive back or Zay Flowers taking another leap in his development, the focus is internal. The ceiling of this roster won't be defined by who they trade for. It'll be defined by who steps up from within. So while the rest of the league might be blowing up the Commanders' phones trying to see what it'll take to pry McLaurin loose, don't expect to see a call coming from Baltimore. This team has its eyes on something bigger than a flashy midseason. Trade! They're building towards sustained success, and sometimes the best moves are the ones you don't make. And that brings us to something that really deserves more attention than it's getting, because in a league where so much of the media spotlight is focused on flashy trades, superstar contracts, and big-name drama, we tend to overlook the actual process of building a strong team. Not just assembling talent, but developing it, nurturing it, getting the most out of players that on paper aren't supposed to be the headline grabbers. And that's where someone like Jalen Armour-Davis comes into the picture in a really fascinating way. Let's rewind for a second. When Armour-Davis came out of Alabama in the 2022 NFL Draft, there were expectations. Maybe not sky-high expectations. He was a 4th-round pick after all. But there was this idea that he could be a solid depth piece in a system that values intelligence and versatility. He wasn't seen as the next Marlon Humphrey or anything. Close to that, but what caught people's attention back then was his football IQ. The guy understood the game. He saw the field like a coach. That was always his edge. But unfortunately, talent and brains aren't always enough in the NFL. Because the number one ability is always availability. And for the better part of 2 seasons, Armour-Davis just couldn't stay on the field. It was frustrating, not just for the coaching staff or the fans, but for the player himself. Hip issues, hamstring strains, random setbacks that kept derailing his progress. It felt like every time he started to get some momentum, another injury pulled the rug out from under him. And in a league that moves fast and shows very little patience, especially with mid-round guys, that kind of pattern can quickly land you in forgotten territory. But here's where it gets interesting, and honestly kind of inspiring, Because instead of fading into the background, Armour Davis kept grinding, quietly, consistently, without drama or headlines. And now heading into year 4 with his rookie contract coming to an end, he's emerging again. This time not just as a body fighting for reps, but as someone who the defensive coordinator is publicly calling out as one of the smartest players in the entire secondary. That's a big deal. That's not something coaches say lightly, especially not in Baltimore, where the defensive culture has always been built on toughness, intelligence, and accountability. Zach Orr's comments weren't just fluff either. He made it clear Jalen knows every position in the secondary. Outside corner, slot, safety. He understands the calls, the adjustments, the leverage techniques, everything. And in a defense that demands adaptability and quick thinking, that's a huge asset. Think about how many times a game a defense has to shift based on motion tempo or formation. Having someone who can seamlessly slide between roles without missing a beat, that's incredibly valuable, especially now when the Ravens are suddenly facing depth concerns at safety due to injury. With Darius Washington out for most of the year, that creates a very real need in the secondary. And sure, the team could go looking for a veteran free agent. That's always a possibility. But why not give the opportunity to someone who's already been in the system for 3 years? Someone who knows the terminology, understands the coaching staff's expectations, and has built trust behind the scenes, even if he hasn't had the chance to fully prove it on Sundays yet. Armour Davis is earning reps at multiple spots during training camp. And that's not just coaches being generous. That's a signal that the door is open for him to claim a legitimate role in this defense, maybe even beyond just this season. Because if he can stay healthy, and yeah, that's still the big if here, he brings something you just can't teach: intelligence, awareness, positional flexibility. And let's not forget he's still only 25 years old. There's time for him to write a completely different chapter in his career. What makes this story even more compelling is how it fits into the Ravens' overall philosophy. Right now, this is a team that doesn't panic. They don't overreact. When something goes wrong, like losing a key depth piece in the secondary, they don't immediately start throwing money or draft picks at the problem. They look inward first. They trust their process. They look at guys who've been waiting in the wings and ask, is now your time? That's what's happening with Armour Davis. And it's that kind of culture that keeps the Ravens competitive year after year, even in a conference as stacked and brutal as the AFC. Think about what it means to have someone who's been mostly anonymous for the past 2 seasons suddenly being mentioned in the same breath as some of the smartest guys in the room. That tells you he's doing the work. That tells you the coaches are watching. And more importantly, it tells you he's not just surviving training camp, he's thriving. There's a different energy around a player when he knows this could be the turning point of his career. That energy is real. And right now, Jalen Armour Davis is carrying that with him every time he steps on the practice field. But again, this is Baltimore. Nothing is handed out. You gotta earn it. You gotta win your reps. And you've gotta stay on the field. That last part might be the biggest hurdle for Armour Davis, because the coaches can love your mind, your instincts, your communication, your preparation, all of it. But if your body can't hold up to the grind of an NFL season, all that other stuff just becomes potential. And potential, as we all know, doesn't win games. Execution does. So that's where the focus has to be now. Not just earning reps, but maintaining consistency. Avoiding the little setbacks that have derailed his momentum in the past. Taking care of his body. Trusting the training staff. Knowing when to push and when to pull back. Because the opportunity is there, maybe more clearly than ever before. The Ravens aren't just looking for a backup. They're looking for someone who can step into meaningful snaps if the situation calls for it. And Armour Davis has a legitimate chance to be that guy. This kind of player development storyline might not make headlines like a potential McLaurin trade, but in a lot of ways it's even more important. Because trades and free agent signings can give you a short-term boost. But developing your own talent, that's what gives you sustainability. That's what keeps your roster deep and competitive when injuries hit, when the schedule tightens, when you're trying to make a playoff push in December. The teams that can get consistent contributions from guys drafted outside the first round, those are the teams that make noise in January. And let's not forget, this isn't happening in a vacuum. Armour Davis is stepping up at a time when the Ravens secondary is already considered one of the best in the league. That's not an easy room to break into. You got proven stars. You got high draft picks. You got vocal leaders. To earn your place in that kind of environment, you have to be sharp every single day. You have to prove that you're not just holding your own. You're elevating the group around you. And based on everything we're hearing from the coaches, HARBAUGH Davis is doing just that. It's also a sign of something bigger. The Ravens aren't just building a team. They're building a culture where smart players thrive, where versatility is valued, where the path to success isn't always straight, but it's always possible if you stay locked in and do the work. That's the message HARBAUGH Davis is sending right now, not just to his teammates, but to every young player in the building. It's not about where you start. It's about how you respond when things don't go your way. And more importantly, it's about staying ready for your moment, even if it takes longer than expected to arrive. So while the NFL headlines might still be focused on whether or not McLaurin ends up getting traded, or how much he's worth, or which team might be willing to meet his demands, Baltimore is quietly doing what they've always done best: building from within, giving overlooked players a chance, letting development take center stage, and staying true to their identity even when the league around them is obsessed with quick fixes and star chasing. Jalen HARBAUGH Davis might not be a household name. He might not be on anyone's fantasy radar. But if he keeps doing what he's doing, if he stays healthy, keeps stacking good days, and shows up when it matters, he could become exactly the kind of player that keeps this Ravens defense humming at an elite level. Maybe he never becomes a superstar. Maybe he never makes a Pro Bowl. But sometimes the guys who don't get the spotlight are the ones who make the difference when it counts. And in a league where depth is everything and injuries are inevitable, having someone like HARBAUGH Davis ready to step in and contribute, not just fill a spot but actually contribute, could be one of the smartest investments this team has made in a long time. Not through a trade, not through a splashy free agent signing, but through patience, through coaching, through belief in a guy who just needed time, health, and a little bit of opportunity. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support keeps us bringing you the latest news on the Baltimore Ravens. And hey, drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from the flock. In what could be described as a potential storm brewing within the Baltimore Ravens organization, recent comments made by head coach John Harbaugh have ignited a firestorm of speculation among fans and analysts alike. During a press conference earlier this week, Harbaugh suddenly hinted at internal issues, suggesting that a player may be contaminating the locker room. While he refrained from naming names or diving into specifics, the gravity of his tone and the deliberate choice of the word contaminating sparked immediate questions. Was this a reference to morale, attitude, or something even more serious? Insiders close to the organization have remained tight-lipped, but whispers around the league suggest a growing unease behind closed doors. These are not the kinds of statements that coaches typically make without significant reason, especially not a coach like Harbaugh, who has built a reputation for managing strong personalities and maintaining a culture of discipline. The very notion that someone within the team could be sowing discord raises critical concerns about team unity and leadership dynamics. It's a rare moment of openness from the seasoned coach, and perhaps a sign that deeper issues may be festering as the team gears up for what is expected to be a high-stakes season. With the Ravens currently seen as one of the top contenders in the AFC, any disruption from within could prove to be detrimental. While Harbaugh has long been praised for his ability to guide the team through turbulent waters, the cryptic nature of his recent remarks indicates that this may be a challenge unlike any he has faced before. According to some unnamed sources within the NFL circle, the concern may not be about just one isolated incident, but rather a pattern of behavior that has been building over time. Speculation has begun to swirl around a few prominent figures within the team, with particular attention being paid to newer additions who may not yet have fully assimilated into the team's tightly knit culture. There's also been chatter about a possible conflict between some veteran players and emerging stars, leading to a divided atmosphere. Whether this contamination refers to locker room politics, behavioral issues, or a breakdown in communication, it is clear that something has prompted Harbaugh to go public, albeit in veiled terms. That alone signals a level of frustration or concern that cannot be ignored, and the consequences could ripple far beyond the team's internal dynamics. League insiders have begun dissecting every move and interaction within the Ravens training camp sessions, looking for signs of tension or division. While the team continues to show cohesion on the field, some observers have noted unusual moments. Players seen walking off from team huddles earlier than usual, less interaction during drills, and an overall mood shift that could be described as subdued. It's a stark contrast to the typically energetic and focused atmosphere that has defined Ravens practices in past years. The speculation has also spilled onto social media, with fans pointing fingers and constructing theories based on body language, cryptic tweets, and subtle hints dropped by beat reporters. Though none of these speculations are confirmed, the level of scrutiny is undeniable. Even respected former players and analysts have started weighing in, suggesting that there might be more truth to Harbaugh's remarks than the franchise would publicly admit. It begs the question, if there truly is a player whose presence is negatively impacting the group, what steps will the leadership take? And more importantly, how soon? These questions have begun to overshadow discussions about the team's playoff aspirations and roster depth. As speculation intensifies, some media voices have begun to call for transparency, urging the organization to address the situation head-on rather than allowing it to linger and fester. However, in the tightly controlled world of NFL franchises, where reputations and contract negotiations hang in the balance, openness is rarely the first course of action. It's plausible that Harbaugh's choice of words was a strategic move, a warning shot aimed more at the locker room than the public. Perhaps he hopes that the message will resonate internally and spark self-correction before harsher decisions are required. At the same time, this approach carries risk. Publicizing internal issues, even vaguely, can damage morale or invite further division. The Ravens now find themselves at a crossroads, needing to manage not only their on-field performance, but also the growing narrative off the field. Rival teams will undoubtedly take note of the potential instability, looking for opportunities to exploit it. Harbaugh, a master tactician in many ways, must now navigate not just game plans, but also the psychology of a team possibly dealing with internal strife. Every move from here on will be heavily scrutinized, and the margin for error has shrunk considerably. Moving forward, all eyes will be on the Ravens' upcoming preseason games and media availability, how players interact with one another, what is said during interviews, and even who starts or sits could be dissected for clues. If the contaminating presence truly exists, the franchise will be under pressure to address it either through internal resolution or, in more drastic scenarios, by parting ways with a disruptive figure. There's also the broader question of leadership. How team captains and veterans respond to Harbaugh's message could set the tone for what follows. In a league where chemistry often makes the difference between contenders and disappointments, resolving such matters swiftly and effectively is crucial. For now, the identity of the alleged disruptor remains a mystery, but the story is far from over. As the whispers grow louder and the stakes get higher, the Ravens' ability to remain focused and united will be put to the ultimate test. Whether this is a minor bump in the road or the beginning of a larger unraveling remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. In Baltimore, the tension is rising, and the NFL world is watching very closely. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay in the loop with exclusive news on our Baltimore Ravens, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what the flock thinks. Drop your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next one.